What's up, guys? Imran here from the Stuff They Should Have Taught Us podcast. And on this episode, I'm going to be talking to you guys about how you can get out of debt using the debt snowball method. This is a beginner debt repayment method, and I always recommend it as a good starting point for anyone who's looking to begin their journey in getting out of debt, whether that be student loans, credit cards, mortgage, whatever it is. This is the preferred method that I always get people to start off on when it comes to debt repayment. So, like I said before, the snowball method is essentially just a debt reduction strategy. All you're really doing is paying off all of your debt in order from the smallest debt to the largest one. And it's broken down into four simple steps. The first one is just going to be listing out all of your debt from smallest to largest. The second one is going to be making sure you're making the minimum payments at least on all of them. And then the third step is once you're making the minimum payment on all of your different debts, pay as much as possible as you can on the smallest one. And essentially, the fourth step is to just keep repeating that every time your smallest debt goes away. So I'm going to walk you guys through an example that might be a little bit easier for you to wrap your head around, as this is kind of a new topic for a lot of people. A lot of people don't think about strategies for repaying debt, but they can actually help you get out of debt a lot quicker and help you save money in the long run by making sure that you're not paying any unnecessary interest. Also, just a quick disclaimer before you start implementing some of these debt reduction strategies, I always like to advise that you have an emergency fund of something at least $1,000, preferably 6 months worth of living expenses, and that you have a proper budget because being able to stop leakage from your bank account, stop money that just kind of disappears from your bank account is going to help you a lot when it comes to debt reduction. Um, if you're properly accounting for all of your money, if you already have an emergency fund and you still find that you don't have extra money to throw at paying off your debt faster, I do recommend that you find some sort of side hustle, whether that be selling stuff on eBay, maybe mowing lawns, shoveling driveways, freelancing, consulting, whatever it is. But I only recommend that after you have your emergency fund in place and you have a budget, and if and only if you still can't really find a way to make the dollars that you have coming in already work. So, assuming you have your emergency fund done and your budgeting is right, you should hopefully have some extra money that's now freed up to be used in our debt snowball debt reduction strategy. So, I'm essentially going to give you a little example. Imagine you have some outdated bill for $500, say a medical bill, and then maybe $2,000 on a credit card, maybe 20,000 on a car loan and 30,000 on a student loan. And let's just assume that the minimum payments for all of those debts are as follows: 50 for the lowest one, 100 for the second lowest one, 150 for the third lowest one, and 200 for the highest one. And obviously these numbers are not realistic, but it's just to use as an example. So the first step is to make sure you're paying the minimum payment on all of them. The first step is to make sure you're paying the minimum payment on all of them. And then any extra money that you have after your budgeting and including all the minimum payments, I want you to throw at the smallest debt that you have, maybe that $500 debt. So if the minimum payment on that $500 debt is $50 and you're able to find an extra $50 somewhere after your budget, then you're going to throw $100 a month at that smallest debt. Now, once you do that, and you actually do eventually pay off that debt, you're going to take that 100 that you were paying to pay off that debt, and you're going to add it to the other 100, which is the minimum payment on your next smallest debt, which is now your smallest debt. And together, you're going to be making a $200 payment into that debt that you had before. And so essentially what happens is every time you finish paying down one of your debts, you combine the monthly payment of the minimum payment of what you were paying on that before, plus everything else that you've been paying, assuming you basically just pretend that the money that you were putting towards a debt that's already paid off is actually not paid off, and you just continue to make those monthly payments. This way, the more debt you pay off, um, it gets easier for you to pay down debt as you go. So, say if we stick with this example and you're paying down the $50 minimum payment on the smallest debt that we mentioned, plus $50 extra that you're able to find, that's $100 a month going towards that. Once that goes away, you add that 100 to the 100 minimum payment for the second lowest debt that you had before. That's $200 a month. And then once that debt is down to zero, you take that $200 a month plus the $150 minimum payment that you were paying on the next debt, right? So that's what, $350, like that. So your payments are actually the same month after month, but what you'll see is that your debt is just going to keep going down. So you're going to keep the payments the same. The total amount of money you're putting towards your debt every month is actually the same, but your debt is just going to start disappearing essentially. And this is one of the easier, faster ways to pay down your debt. I know debt repayment strategies aren't the most exciting thing in the world, but 77% of Americans are going to find themselves in debt at some point. So it's very important that you have a proper strategy to pay down this debt, because it's going to save you a lot of money on interest. So more than anything, why the debt snowball method is so successful is that it's mainly due to the fact that you're actually modifying your behavior. It's not really about math. It's just about modifying your behavior and your attitude towards paying down debt. You'll see that once you pay down one debt, it gives you a little bit of momentum to keep paying down other debts. And you might even get a little dopamine hit every time you make a payment. No promises. But that's kind of why most people find success with the debt snowball method of debt reduction. I will cover some other methods that might be a little bit more advanced, meaning they're probably a little bit harder to stick to, might require a little bit more discipline. But this is the recommended method that I always get everyone started with. So once again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to just message me. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to share it with your friends. We do have a merch store up. The link is going to be in the description. Anyway, guys, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I hope you learned something.